My name is Jordan Hale. I am 38 years old, and I am a Major General in the United States Army. And right now, I am standing in the corner of a wedding hall where my own family tried to pretend I didn't exist. The silver cutlery gleams under the chandeliers. The laughter flows easily over glasses of champagne. And my name for the past 2 hours has not been spoken once, until now. The groom's father, Colonel Robert Callahan, retired, clears his throat. He takes the microphone with hands that carry the weight of war and memory. His voice, when it comes, is low but steady, and suddenly the room tilts. Every eye turns, every breath stills. There's someone here today who saved my life 12 years ago. I was wounded, pinned down in Helmand Province, bleeding out, and I thought I'd never see home again. But she crawled through open fire, dragged me to safety, and refused to leave me behind. The silence thickens, forks lower midair. I feel my heart kick once against my ribs, but I don't move, I don't speak. I've learned not to. He turns deliberate, unhurried, and lifts his hand in a crisp military salute. This, he says, is Major General Jordan Hale. The room doesn't breathe. And then one by one they rise. The soldiers first, old uniforms, young ones, strangers, who understand something my family never could. They face me. They salute. They hold their bodies straight in reverence to the life they almost forgot stood quietly among them. The civilians follow, uncertain at first, then clapping soft at first, then louder until the applause swells and crashes like a tide. My family, the ones who said I was just a forgotten guest, the ones who left me off the wedding list, freeze. My mother's hand trembles against her wine glass. My sister's face strains of color. No one dares to speak. No one dares to breathe. And I stand still. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is letting the truth speak for itself. For a moment, no one moves. The weight of the colonel's salute hangs in the air like something sacred, something too fragile to touch. I can feel the burn of every stare, every breath caught mid-chest. But I keep my hands at my sides. I keep my face still, because I have learned power does not come from reaction. It comes from presence. And then quietly, almost imperceptibly, the first soldier stands. He's older, late 50s maybe, with silver hair and eyes that have seen too much. His uniform bears the telltale pins of campaigns long past. He turns toward me without hesitation, lifts his hand and salutes. Another rises. A woman this time. Younger, navy blues. Her salute is sharp, precise. Then another, and another. One by one, the soldiers in the room, some in dress uniforms, some in civilian suits, but carrying themselves the same way, stand. Their faces are solemn, their movements deliberate, and they all turn to me. It doesn't happen all at once. It ripples, quiet but unstoppable. A wave of recognition that moves from table to table, cutting through silk gowns and polished cufflinks, and the brittle falseness of small talk. I hear the soft scrape of chairs pushed back, the breath of fabric as people shift, the clink of a glass knocked over somewhere far away. But no one speaks, no one laughs. The civilians, those who have never worn a uniform, glance around nervously, unsure whether to follow. Some rise awkwardly, some clap their hands without really knowing why. But the soldiers, the ones who understand, they hold steady. They salute. I stand motionless. I don't return the gesture. I don't need to. The applause comes slowly, at first scattered, hesitant. Then it builds, louder, fuller, until it fills the entire hall with a strange, almost surreal warmth. The kind of sound that vibrates through the floor and into your bones. The kind of sound no one in this room will ever forget. And still, I don't move. Because this isn't about revenge. This is about recognition. I let my eyes travel slowly to the faces I know too well. My mother, white-knuckled on her wine glass, her lips pulled into that sharp, thin line she wears like armor. My sister Elena, pale and wide-eyed, her hands frozen mid-clap. Her groom stands rigid beside her, not even pretending to smile. None of them saw this coming. And the truth is, I didn't either. I never thought I would see the day when the same name they whispered with shame would one day be spoken with honor. Not like this. Not in front of them. not in front of the world. And as the clapping swells around me, as the salutes hold unbroken, I feel something shift deep inside. Not anger, not triumph. Something quieter, something I don't yet have words for. I still remember the weight of the envelope when it arrived. Heavier than it should have been. Cream-colored, embossed edges. My full name typed neatly across the front, except it wasn't my name anymore. Not to them. Jordan Hale, 38, Major General, forgotten daughter. The wedding invitation came not as a gesture of love, but as a quiet threat. A warning disguised in gold lettering and scripted fonts. My sister Elena was getting married. My name wasn't on the guest list, but my mother sent it anyway, along with a note written in her perfect, practiced hand. If you come, please don't make it about you. I didn't laugh when I read it. I didn't cry either. I just folded the note and placed it back inside, setting it on my metal desk like it was a live grenade. I hadn't seen my mother or Elena in over 6 years. Not since my father's funeral. They told me not to wear the uniform that day, said it would draw too much attention. I wore it anyway. Sat in the back. Watched them take the front row while I stood outside their frame of belonging. I wasn't family that day. I was furniture, background. I remember the way my mother looked past me through me. The way Elena pressed her lips together, her face carefully blank. As if she couldn't decide whether I embarrassed her or simply didn't exist. And now, 6 years later, the same cold hands were reaching for me again. Not to include me, but to keep me controlled. To remind me where I stood. Or more accurately, where I didn't. I held the invitation between my fingers, tracing the raised gold letters like they might burn me. I whispered to the empty room I wasn't invited. I was warned. And for reasons I couldn't yet name, that was enough to make me want to show up. The decision came quietly. No dramatic moment, no outburst, just a name. A headline buried halfway down an online article. Colonel Robert Callahan read, to give away his son at spring wedding. I read it twice. My fingers hovered over the mouse breath caught somewhere between memory and disbelief. Callahan, 12 years ago. Helmand Province. Sand smoke blood. I could still smell it if I closed my eyes. The details came back in jagged flashes, the explosion that ripped through the convoy. The chaos of voices crackling through radios. The distinct metallic taste of dust and fear. I saw him, Colonel Callahan, crumpled against twisted steel, his leg-shredded eyes wide with the kind of terror you never outrun. I remember the crawl, hands digging into sharp gravel shrapnel, burning through my shoulder. I remember his voice broken raw, saying, "Leave me." I remember whispering, "Not today," as I pulled him across open ground under gunfire. I never thought I'd see his name again. The irony pressed in hard. The man I saved, the man whose life I held together with my bare hands, was now the father of the groom in the family that had erased me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the faded photograph attached to the article. His face was older now. Lined. But the eyes were the same. Something in my chest shifted. A click. A decision. I booked the flight without another thought. I wasn't going to be welcomed. I wasn't going to be forgiven. But I was going. And sometimes that's all that matters. The base at Stuttgart was quiet that morning. Unusually so. The wind pressed against the windows, rattling the blinds in that slow, rhythmic way that always reminded me of distant gunfire. I packed light. One bag. My dress uniform folded with clinical precision. Metals polished. Buttons aligned. The fabric felt heavier than I remembered. I ran my fingers down the sleeves as the memories surfaced. Uninvited briefing rooms, command tents, the smell of diesel and earth and loss. The knock came soft but sharp. It was Simmons, an old friend, older still in the ways that matter. He didn't sit, he didn't ask. He just looked at the uniform spread across my bed. Then at me. "You're really going," he said. I nodded. "It's time." He hesitated. Then he spoke, voice low but steady. "Don't wear it like armor. Wear it like memory." I let that settle between us, because I knew what he meant. The uniform was never about protection. It was about truth. about who I became when everything else family approval belonging fell away. I'm not going for them, I said. I'm not going for anyone. He smiled, faint but genuine. Good. I folded the uniform into the bag, zipping it closed with the same care I'd used disarming a mine. My heart felt oddly still. No fear, no anger, just quiet. I wasn't going to be seen. I wasn't going to be celebrated. I was going because standing still felt worse. Because sometimes the only way forward is through the very place they told you not to return. I left the room. The wind caught the door as it closed behind me, and I didn't look back. The house looked exactly the same. White shutters, trimmed hedges, the kind of polished quiet that speaks of things not said. I stood at the edge of the driveway longer than I meant to the duffel bag, heavy on my shoulder, the air thick with spring blossoms, that somehow made me feel even more like a stranger. She opened the door before I knocked. My mother, Barbara Hale, perfect as always, beige sweater pearls hair pulled tight. Her eyes scanned me in one swift motion, head to toe, and in that brief pause, I saw it disappointment, disapproval, discomfort. The holy trinity of her affection. Jordan, she said flatly. Not a hug, not a smile, just my name stripped bare. Mom, I replied, voice even. She stepped aside to let me in, careful not to touch me. The scent hit me first, lemon polish always. Every surface gleaming with the kind of control that went beyond cleanliness. I dropped my bag by the door. She gestured toward the dining room without looking at me. They're waiting. I wasn't sure who they were until I stepped in. Elena, of course, sat at the center of it all. Her hair perfect, her makeup flawless, the ring on her finger catching the chandelier light just so. Around her familiar faces, cousins, neighbors, family friends I hadn't seen since the last time I was worth photographing. No one stood. No one moved. Jordan Elena said too brightly, "You made it." I nodded. That was all. I sat at the empty chair nearest the sideboard farthest from the conversation. The plates were already set. The wine already poured for everyone but me. The meal was polite in the way a firing squad is polite. Every word dipped in honey, every glance sharpened to cut. So my uncle began between bites, still overseas. Mostly I answered non-committal. Must be hard, another voice chimed in, all that moving around. Never settling down, the smiles stayed fixed. The laughter soft, measured. The digs subtle, but sharp. Elena laughed too loudly at a cousin's joke. My mother corrected the angle of a napkin. I kept my hands folded on my lap, knuckles white. The words they didn't say were louder than the ones they did. And then came the neighbor, Mrs. Langford, arriving late with her usual plastic container of deviled eggs. She paused when she saw me, blinked, tilted her head. "My goodness," she said, "you're still in the military." I smiled without teeth. "Yes, ma'am." Her gaze lingered on my posture, my uniform, the way I held myself. She didn't mean harm, but harm doesn't always come from intention. "Thought you might have, you know." She continued with a fluttering hand, gotten out by now. I didn't answer. Just let the words drift over me like smoke. The table went quiet for a heartbeat. No one corrected her. No one spoke for me. I wasn't surprised. This was the dance we'd always done, me on the margins, them in the spotlight. My uniform was a boundary they refused to cross, something too foreign, too inconvenient to acknowledge. I took a sip of water, kept my gaze low. They didn't have to say it. I wasn't one of them. Not here, not now, not ever. The ceremony began under a sky so blue it almost felt scripted. The venue was beautiful rows of white chairs, pastel flowers, the soft hum of string instruments. A perfect afternoon curated for photographs and polite applause. And in the middle of it all, my sister Elena, glowing in silk and lace, the center of a world I had never been part of. I found my seat at the farthest table. Table 12. Near the catering doors, the linen on my table didn't quite match the others, an accident, I told myself, but I knew better. Every detail in my family's orbit was intentional, even exclusion. The place card read J. Hale. No rank, no title. Just the bare minimum to acknowledge I existed. I sat alone. From where I was placed, I couldn't even see the altar clearly. The guests filled the front rows, friends, distant relatives, business partners. I spotted the groom's father, Colonel Callahan, near the front. He hadn't seen me yet. Or maybe he had and chose not to show it. I couldn't tell. The music swelled. The doors opened. Elena stepped through, radiant and glowing, arm linked with my mother's. I felt the distance more sharply than ever. I watched them exchange vows from the edge of things. I didn't belong to the smiles, the shared glances, the gentle weeping. I was an outsider with a bloodline. Nothing more. When the ceremony ended, I didn't stand. I let the procession pass me by: the bridal party, the newlyweds, the guests who barely noticed I was there. At the reception, it only deepened. The ballroom shimmered under golden lights. The clink of crystal glasses, the rustle of designer gowns, the low hum of polite laughter. I took my seat again near the exit, near the forgotten corners. I didn't expect a welcome, but I didn't expect the cold precision either. The MC began the toasts. Names were called. Stories were shared. My mother's voice rang out clear as she raised her glass. To love, to loyalty, to family. I wasn't mentioned. Not once. I caught the quick glance between her and the event coordinator. A slight nod. A whispered exchange. I knew that look. I'd seen it 1,000 times in command briefings, silent instructions passed without words. Later, I overheard it confirmed by one of the servers. My mother had specifically requested that my name not be mentioned in any official part of the ceremony. It was cleaner that way, less complicated. I watched Elena bask in the attention. She sparkled under the lights, laughing, radiant. Her new husband, the son of a man whose life I had once saved, stood by her side, polite, polished, unreadable. I sat with my hands folded, my face neutral. I wasn't angry. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles deep into your bones when you realize the people who share your name will never share your heart. I didn't eat much. The wine bypassed my table. The conversations flowed around me without ever touching me. I sat in silence. The only sound in my head, the quiet reminder I had carried for years: they don't see you. They never did. The first toast was harmless enough. A college friend of Elena's, someone whose name I couldn't remember, said all the right things. Stories of childhood, shared laughter, the kind of polished anecdotes that slide in and out of memory without consequence. People laughed. Glasses clinked. Cameras flashed. I stayed quiet at my table near the wall. Hands folded in my lap, my expression set to neutral. The wine never made it to me, but I didn't mind. I preferred clarity. Then it was Elena's turn. She stood effortlessly the way she always had. Poised. Beautiful. Every eye in the room turned to her as if on cue. She held the microphone with ease, her diamond catching the light. Her smile just wide enough to seem genuine. I just want to thank everyone for being here, she began, her voice lilting and warm. It means the world to me and to Andrew. Today is about love, family, and new beginnings. There were polite nods, murmurs of agreement. Her eyes flicked briefly in my direction, just for a second, before she continued. I've been so lucky, she said, her tone shifting slightly. Surrounded by people who've supported me, believed in me, celebrated every step I've taken. I know not everyone is that fortunate. There it was, the first crack. Her smile held, but her voice dipped into something sharper. Some people, well, she said lightly, letting the pause linger. Some people just never quite figure it out, do they? They drift. They get lost. And while the rest of us build lives, careers, families, some people stay stuck. The laughter came small at first, then louder, controlled, measured. The kind of laughter that slices without drawing visible blood. My mother didn't stop her. No one did. I felt my fingertips tighten against the fabric of my dress. I kept my breathing even. Elena's smile grew wider. But today isn't about that, she added sweetly. Today is about joy, about looking forward. So let's raise a glass to new beginnings, and to leaving the past exactly where it belongs. The applause that followed was soft but steady, polite, as if nothing cruel had been said at all. I didn't clap, I didn't blink. Instead, I let my eyes drift across the room to the faces who knew exactly what she meant and laughed anyway, to the ones who didn't even notice, and to the few who shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. That wasn't the first time they laughed at me. It wasn't the first time I was the target they dressed in silk and politeness before tearing down. But this time I was different, because I wasn't here for their approval. I wasn't here to beg for inclusion or forgiveness. I was here to witness them, to let them reveal themselves in their own words, their own choices, their own smallness. And when the laughter faded and the glasses clinked, I sat still in the quiet that followed, unchanged by their noise. That was the last time I allowed their story to shape me, the last time they got to decide who I was. The smell of burnt metal always comes back first. Even after all these years, I can still feel the dry sting of sand in my mouth, the weight of the gear pressing into my back, the frantic static in my earpiece that never quite cleared. It was Helmand Province, Afghanistan. 12 years ago, midday heat sharp enough to split the sky. We were on convoy patrol routine until it wasn't. The explosion hit without warning. I remember the sound, sharp, deafening, and unnatural crack that tore through metal and bone alike. The armored vehicle in front of mine flipped sideways, fire licking through the seams. Screams bled through the radio, panicked and jagged. I barely remember unstrapping myself. Just motion, muscle, instinct. Colonel Callahan's voice came through distorted half-words, broken phrases. I could hear the pain in it, even over the noise. I ran toward the blast. People like to tell stories about bravery like it's clean, like there's no fear in it. But that's a lie. The truth is, I was terrified. The kind of fear that makes your fingertips numb, that locks your knees, that whispers, "You're not going to make it out." And I moved anyway. I found him crumpled behind a twisted wheel frame. Blood soaked his left leg, too much blood. Shrapnel tore clean through the flesh. His face was ghost white. His eyes met mine, wild, disbelieving. "Leave me," he rasped. I shook my head. Not today. There was no cover, no time. Just the grinding sound of distant gunfire, and the knowledge that any second the next blast could come. I dropped to my stomach, hands raw against the gravel, and began the crawl. Inch by inch, my elbows dug into the dirt. My breath came fast, too fast, but I forced it steady. My fingers trembled. I still remember that part, the way they wouldn't stop shaking. For one terrifying moment, I thought I wouldn't reach him, but I did. I hauled him onto my back with strength I didn't know I had. The weight of him nearly broke me, but I kept moving, grinding teeth, burning lungs, every nerve screaming. Somewhere in the distance, someone shouted coordinates. Somewhere else, the radio crackled with a voice asking for status. I couldn't answer. I just kept crawling. By the time the medevac reached us, I had almost blacked out. Blood soaked my uniform, not all of it his. I barely remember the lift the chopper, the way Callahan's hand gripped my wrist before they took him inside. He whispered something then. I didn't catch it. But I remember this, the overwhelming certainty that I wasn't going to survive. The taste of copper. The tremble in my hands that wouldn't stop. I was afraid. I was so afraid. And somehow I moved anyway. I hadn't expected to see him alone. Colonel Robert Callahan stood near the edge of the terrace, his back straight, despite the years a glass of something amber in his hand. The ceremony was still an hour away. The air smelled of cut grass and expensive cologne, and somewhere behind us the sound of string instruments drifted through open doors. He turned when he heard my footsteps. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I recognized the way he held himself, shoulders squared, chin lifted. But his eyes softened when they landed on me. Not with pity, not with obligation, just recognition. "General Hale," he said quietly. "Colonel," I replied, equally soft. The corner of his mouth lifted, something close to a smile, but not quite. His gaze dipped to the ribbons on my blouse, then back to my eyes. "I wondered if you'd come," he murmured. I offered the barest shrug. Seemed appropriate. We stood in a pocket of stillness while the world moved on without us. He didn't mention Helmand. He didn't have to. I could see it in the way his eyes flickered just briefly, to the way I shifted my weight, the barely visible scar along my wrist, the stiffness in my right hand that never fully healed. He remembered. But neither of us said it aloud. "I hear you're stationed in Germany," he said, after a beat, keeping his tone light. I nodded. "Stuttgart." He swirled the glass in his hand, the ice clinking softly. "Good place," he said. "Good people." I allowed myself the faintest smile. Sometimes. His gaze drifted toward the distant lawn, where Elena posed for photos, her laughter carrying through the breeze. He exhaled slowly. "Weddings," he said with a quiet sigh, as if the word itself held too much weight. I didn't respond. There was a tension between us, not discomfort, but something older, heavier. The kind of tension that grows from shared survival, from things left unspoken because they don't need to be voiced to exist. He looked at me again, this time more directly, his eyes steady calm. "There are debts," he said softly, "that don't have words." For the briefest second, the breath caught in my throat. I held his gaze and nodded, voice low. "Some debts don't need collecting." He gave the smallest tilt of his head, half respect, half release. The kind of nod only soldiers understand. As I turned to leave, his voice followed me, gentle but resolute. "See you inside, ma'am." I didn't answer, but in that moment I knew. There are debts too deep for gratitude. There are battles that don't leave scars on the skin, but etch themselves somewhere far harder to reach. And some reckonings don't need to be spoken to come. The letter had been buried deep. I found it by accident, if accidents exist. Tucked inside a folder my mother left sitting near the guest room dresser, half covered by silk scarves and RSVP cards. My name caught my eye first. Not in ink, but in print. A photocopy, old edges yellowing. At first I thought it was nothing. A random document, a misfiled paper. But then I saw the header. Department of Defense. Internal Review. My pulse tightened in my throat. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the paper trembling slightly in my hands as I read each line. Anonymous letter. Claims of misconduct. Allegations that I had falsified combat reports to earn my Bronze Star. That I had exaggerated the events in Helmand. That my actions endangered the lives of fellow soldiers. A report I never knew existed. I felt my fingertips grow cold. The handwriting, though printed, was familiar in its curves, its particular slant. My heart pulled tight as I scanned the paragraph again and again, each word cutting deeper than the last. Then my eyes landed on one small giveaway, a single word. Irregardless. I closed my eyes. The memory surfaced without mercy. Elena. High school. Her English teacher marking that same word in red ink. I remembered teasing her about it once years ago. She used it often, not knowing it wasn't real. It was a signature without meaning to be. I exhaled, sharp and hollow. It was her. 7 years ago, I had been flagged without warning, my promotion to brigadier general, delayed indefinitely, my record suddenly under silent scrutiny. I'd never understood why. I thought it was politics. Bad luck. A quiet enemy I couldn't name. I was wrong. The enemy had been my own blood. I sat motionless, the paper resting across my knees, the room around me fading into static. My heart wasn't racing. It wasn't anger. It was something worse, a hollowing. The kind of emptiness that comes when the ground shifts under you, when the betrayal is so precise, so close. You wonder if you'll ever trust the shape of your own memory again. I thought of every moment since, every forced smile, every careful family gathering, every polite "we're proud of you" served with side glances. All of it. A performance. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My fingers traced the edge of the page. I could have torn it, burned it, but I didn't. Instead, I folded it once clean, deliberate, and slid it into my pocket. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Some wounds bleed, some wounds bury. And some cut so silently you don't even know you've been bleeding until years later. I could have confronted her right then. I could have marched into the next room, held the letter up, and forced her to admit what she had done. I could have made a scene, demanded answers, broken the careful illusion she'd spent years building. But I didn't. I sat alone on the edge of that neatly made guest bed, the air thick with lemon polish and old ghosts, and I stayed still. Because somewhere deep inside, beneath the sharp edges of betrayal, beneath the instinct to fight back, something quieter settled in. I didn't need to win this battle the way they expected. I didn't need their confessions or apologies. I didn't need to hear the excuses, the denial, the inevitable spin they would put on it all. I already knew the truth, and the truth finally was enough. I folded the letter back into my pocket, stood and looked at my reflection in the small oval mirror above the dresser. For a long moment I just stared. The uniform was gone, civilians now. Soft lines, muted colors. But underneath it, beneath every layer of fabric, every scar, every ache that never quite healed, there I was. Me. Not the person they reduced me to. Not the silent child they painted out of family photos. Not the ghost they dressed in blame and smallness. I was still standing. The memory of Simmons' words from weeks earlier surfaced without invitation. Don't wear it like armor. Wear it like memory. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I wouldn't give them the power of my anger. I wouldn't hand them the satisfaction of seeing me break. That had always been their currency: provocation, division, control through reaction. But not this time. Not anymore. The only battle worth winning is the one inside myself. The battle to stay whole, to stay grounded, to walk through fire and come out carrying nothing but the truth. I straightened my shoulders, smoothed the front of my blouse, and stepped out of the room. The house buzzed with laughter as I passed Elena's voice, carrying high and sweet my mother's brittle politeness, weaving through conversations. None of them noticed me move through the hall. None of them turned, and I was glad, because the next time they saw me, I would no longer be asking for space at their table. I would no longer be asking for anything at all. The war I needed to win was already decided. And for the first time in years, I felt free. The clinking of glasses faded into something slower, something strained. The music softened, the air shifted. That was when Colonel Callahan stood. He did it quietly, without theatrics. He placed his glass down, carefully adjusted the cuffs of his jacket, and stepped toward the microphone like he had all the time in the world. His movements were deliberate, precise, the kind of precision that never leaves a soldier, no matter how many years pass. Conversations died mid-sentence. Utensils paused mid-air. Even the servers froze at the edges of the room. He cleared his throat once the sound oddly loud in the silence. "I won't keep you long," he began, voice low but steady. "I know today is about celebration, about new beginnings, about family." A soft ripple of polite smiles passed through the crowd, but something in his tone, something grave, held the room still. "But there's something," he continued, "something I need to say before this day moves on. Something I've carried quietly for years." His eyes scanned the faces. Then slowly, deliberately, they landed on me. I felt my breath catch. My hands tightened in my lap. He kept going. 12 years ago, he said, I served my final combat tour in Afghanistan. On a routine convoy, I was hit, severely wounded. I remember thinking it was the end. I remember the sound of gunfire, the dust in my throat, the weight of my own failure. A murmur moved through the guests' confusion, curiosity, but no one spoke. "I survived that day," he said softly, "because one soldier refused to leave me behind. She crawled through open fire. She carried me out when I couldn't walk. She saved my life." The words hung sharp and absolute. Then he turned. And without rush, without hesitation, he raised his hand in a crisp, perfect salute. "This," he said, his voice clear, "is Major General Jordan Hale." For a heartbeat, the room didn't react. Not a breath, not a whisper. I stayed seated, still. My heart loud in my ears, but my face calm. Then slowly, one by one, the weight of what he said began to settle. The faces shifted. Eyes turned. The temperature of the room changed in an instant. No one laughed. No one smiled. Because some truths land too hard to ignore. The silence stretched until it became something alive, until it filled the cracks they'd all carefully ignored for so long. I held my ground, and for the first time in my life, I watched as their story, the one they wrote without me, finally unraveled. For a moment, everything was still. The sound of Colonel Callahan's voice lingered in the air like the final note of a song no one expected to hear. His hand held steady in the salute, unwavering, unshaken. The weight of his words pressed against every wall of that pristine ballroom. And then, without a signal, without a word, another soldier stood. It was subtle at first, a man in his 50s wearing a dark suit, his back straight as he raised his hand in precise formality. Then another this time, a woman in navy dress. Blues her face, composed her posture perfect. And then another, and another. One by one they rose. It wasn't loud, it wasn't fast, but it was absolute. Dozens of soldiers, some in uniform, some not, stood turned toward me and saluted. I didn't move. I stayed seated, my hands resting lightly on the table, my face composed. The kind of stillness I had learned the hard way on battlefields, in boardrooms, in places where silence speaks louder than shouting. I didn't return the salute. Because this moment wasn't about ritual, it was about memory. I let my eyes travel across the room, slow and deliberate, past the rows of stunned faces, past the half-raised champagne flutes now frozen midair. And then I found them, my mother and Elena. Their expressions shifted in perfect unison. Gone was the polite disinterest. Gone was the carefully curated indifference. In its place, something raw, something they couldn't mask fast enough. Shock, confusion, the first glimmer of something dangerously close to shame. Barbara Hale's fingers tightened around the stem of her wineglass. Her lips parted slightly, as if she meant to speak but had forgotten how. Elena's face drained of color. Her hand trembled visibly, the edge of her champagne flute tilting without her noticing. I didn't smile, not fully, but there was something at the corner of my mouth, something small, something real. The barest curve of quiet satisfaction. Not spite, not vengeance. Just the recognition of truth finally made visible. The applause started soft, one or two claps hesitant, then more, until the room swelled with sound. But I barely heard it. My focus was on them, the ones who'd written me out of the story. The ones who believed I would always stay in the shadows where they left me. They didn't see this coming. I hadn't either. I stayed seated not because I was small, but because I didn't need to rise to be seen. Not anymore. And in that moment, I knew. There are victories that don't need trophies. There are battles you win by standing still. And sometimes, the silence itself is the loudest sound of all. The applause deepened, not loud or wild, but steady. A low rising current that filled the ballroom with something I hadn't heard in years: respect. Not admiration, not pity, respect. The sound washed over me as I stayed seated, hands resting lightly on the tablecloth. I could feel the weight of their gazes now, dozens of them shifting, recalibrating, seeing me not as the disappointment they had been fed for years, but as something entirely different. And then it happened. The first face I saw instinctively was Elena's. Her smile, so carefully constructed just moments before, had cracked. Her lips trembled. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her dress. I could see her chest rise and fall in shallow breaths as the applause swelled. She tried to force a laugh, a small shake of her head. But the room wasn't looking at her anymore. All eyes had turned. She swayed slightly, unsteady on her feet, her hand reaching out as if the ground beneath her had shifted, and then without warning, her knees buckled. Elena collapsed. There was no dramatic scream, no frantic rush, just the sharp collective intake of breath as her body folded her knees, hitting the polished floor with a soft, broken sound. The champagne flute tumbled from her grasp, shattering on impact. The music stopped. The clapping faltered. For a heartbeat, no one moved. I stayed where I was. The first to react was the groom Andrew, his face drawn tight as he crouched to steady her. My mother stood too, her hand to her mouth, but her eyes not once left mine. It was almost surreal the way it unfolded, slow, disconnected, like watching a play from the wings, knowing you're both part of it and completely outside of it all at once. I could have stood. I could have crossed the room, played the role they expected, concerned, forgiving the outcast seeking to rejoin the circle. But I didn't. Because this wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth. And the truth finally, irrevocably had spoken. Somewhere in the crowd, a single person began clapping again. The sound was soft at first, then others joined. Not everyone, but enough. A ripple, a shift. The ones who saw me differently now. The ones who for the first time questioned the story they'd been fed. My mother's face had gone pale. Her jaw clenched so tightly, I thought she might break her own teeth. But still she didn't speak. Couldn't speak. And me, I sat still. Calm, steady. Because some reckonings don't need words. Some are written in silence, in the way a room turns, in the way a heart breaks without noise. And as Elena trembled on the floor, surrounded by everything she thought she controlled, I understood they had lost the story. And I, without lifting a single hand, had taken it back. I didn't need an apology. I wasn't waiting for it. Not from Elena, not from my mother, not from anyone in that room who had spent years trimming me out of the edges of their lives, like I was an inconvenience instead of blood. What I needed, what I had always needed, was far simpler. I needed the truth to be seen. I sat there in that quiet aftermath, my breath steady, my fingertips resting lightly against the base of the glass I hadn't touched. The applause had faded, but its weight lingered in the air. The salutes had ended, but their meaning clung to the room like something permanent. I could feel their eyes still, shifting, searching. The guest didn't know where to look, at Elena still being lifted from the floor, her hands trembling, her face blank with shock, or at me, the woman they had barely noticed for most of the afternoon. Now sitting impossibly still, as if I had been there all along, but was only now coming into focus. Some of them clapped again, softer, uncertain. Some simply sat frozen, their own discomfort laid bare. But me, I was calm, because I understood something in that moment, something I hadn't fully grasped until I saw it written across their faces. Shame doesn't need an audience. It lives quietly, it grows slowly, and when the truth comes, it doesn't shout. It whispers. It wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about humiliation. I had walked through too many real wars to waste my breath fighting for scraps of validation from people who had never truly seen me. The only war that ever mattered, the only one that left real scars, was the one between who they said I was and who I knew myself to be. And that war was over. I let my eyes drift to my mother. Barbara Hale, always composed, always polished, stood stiff. Her hands clenched so tightly against the back of her chair that her knuckles had turned white. She met my gaze only for a second, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. I saw her clearly, without the haze of old longing or the weight of needing to be chosen. I saw her as she was, small, afraid, and utterly powerless to rewrite what the world had just witnessed. I let the silence between us stretch. It didn't suffocate me this time. It freed me. Because the truth had been named, not by me, by them. And I didn't need to explain it. I didn't need to defend it. I didn't need to fight for space I had already claimed by standing still. Some things don't need to be forgiven. Some things just need to be known. And in that ballroom, beneath the soft spill of golden light and the weight of unspoken reckonings, the truth at last stood on its own. She found me later, of course. My mother, Barbara Hale, knocked softly on the door of the small lounge tucked near the back of the venue. I knew the knock before I heard the voice. It was the same one she used when she wanted something, but didn't want to look like she was asking. I didn't get up. I sat by the window, hands resting in my lap, watching the pale spill of sunset over the parking lot. "Jordan," she said gently. "May I?" I nodded once. She closed the door behind her. For a moment she said nothing. She smoothed the front of her blouse, adjusted the delicate pearl bracelet on her wrist. The performance of control. The choreography of old habits. Then she sat across from me and offered the softest version of the smile I knew too well. "You surprised us," she began, her voice calm, measured. "None of us expected." Her words trailed off. She shifted in her seat. The bracelet clinked softly. "You have to understand," she continued. "This family, the expectations. It's not always easy. We people make choices under pressure, to protect, to preserve." I kept my face neutral. She inhaled sharply, her hands folding neatly. "I think," she said, "we could work on something together. A small statement. Just to clarify. You know the tone of what happened, so people understand it wasn't meant to come across as disrespectful." Her eyes met mine, searching for a crack. It could help, for Elena, for the family. I didn't speak for a long moment. Then quietly, I said, "I won't lie for you." Her expression barely flickered, but I saw at the sharp breath the flicker of something old behind her eyes. "It wouldn't be lying," she pressed. "It would be framing. People don't need the full story. Just the right version." I smiled. Just slightly, just enough. "No," I said softly. Her face tightened. "Jordan." "No," I repeated, my voice calm, even. "I'm not cleaning up the mess you made." Her hands fell still in her lap. The silence stretched. I rose from my chair and smoothed the front of my dress. "I don't need their approval," I said quietly. "And I'm not here to rescue yours." She looked away, then her mouth pressed into the same brittle line I'd known my entire life. There was nothing left to say. I left her there, small still and finally powerless. It wasn't over yet. Elena was waiting near the hallway, her face blotched from tears, her hands twisting the hem of her dress, like she could undo the evening with her fingertips. She didn't speak when I approached. She didn't have to. I stopped a few feet away, let the weight of the moment settle. "I found the letter," I said quietly. Her head snapped up. The color drained from her face. For a second she opened her mouth, reflex instinct, but no sound came. She blinked, swallowed. Her lips pressed together so tightly the skin went pale. "I know it was you," I continued, my voice soft but steady. "The anonymous report, the false accusations, the delay in my promotion." Her hands dropped to her sides. She shook her head once. A whisper. But I raised my hand, calm, patient. "Don't," I said. "Don't lie." Her eyes filled with panic. She glanced toward the corridor as if searching for someone to step in to rescue her, but no one came. Our mother appeared at the edge of the hallway, then frozen in place, her face unreadable. I let the silence stretch. "You didn't just send a letter," I said, my voice quieter now. "You made sure I was erased. You made sure I was forgotten. And you did it with a pen because you didn't have the courage to say it to my face." The words didn't rise in anger. They fell soft, deliberate, truth laid bare. Elena shook her head again, tears slipping now, but she said nothing. "I don't need an apology," I said gently. "I don't even need you to admit it." I stepped closer, lowering my voice until it was just between us. "I just need you to live with the truth. Because from this day on, you'll never forget what you did. You'll never unsee what you tried to bury." Her breath shuddered. Our mother remained motionless, eyes wide, but silent. The two of them rooted in the lie, helpless to unwind it. I stepped back, straightened, and I left them there in the soft glow of chandeliers and the echo of everything they couldn't unsay. I stood at the podium with steady hands. The Resilience Foundation banner hung behind me, simple, clean, but heavy with meaning. The room was filled shoulder to shoulder with faces I didn't know but recognized in every way that mattered: veterans, active service members, families, survivors. People who carried stories in their bones the way I did. I took a slow breath, let my fingertips brush the edges of the notes I wasn't going to use. This moment wasn't about reading from a script. It was about finally saying the words I'd carried in silence for too long. "I'm Major General Jordan Hale. I began, voice calm even. For most of my life, I believed that the battlefield was the only place where loyalty and betrayal could truly shape the course of a life. I let that hang soft but sharp. I was wrong. The room was still, focused. Some of the deepest wounds I've seen, some of the most devastating losses, don't come from combat. They come from the places we're told should be safe, from within the walls of our own homes, from the people who are supposed to stand beside us. A few heads nodded. A few eyes dropped. I know that story because I lived it. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. For years I believed that if I stayed silent, if I absorbed the weight of betrayal without complaint, I was doing the right thing. I thought endurance was the measure of strength. My voice softened but held. But I've learned something else: silence doesn't heal. Silence doesn't protect. Silence isolates. And we, those who have served, those who have survived, deserve better. I stepped forward slightly, hands loose at my sides. That's why today I'm announcing the creation of the Resilience Foundation, a support network and legal advocacy group for military personnel who have faced personal betrayal from family, from spouses, from the very people they believe would stand by them. This isn't just about justice, it's about dignity. I paused. We will not be erased. We will not be shamed into quiet. We will not let betrayal define us. The applause came slowly, soft at first, then rising. Not wild, not performative, just real. I let the sound carry, let the truth of it settle into the marrow of the room. I didn't smile, but for the first time in years, I felt light. We weren't silent anymore. He found me after the crowd dispersed. Colonel Callahan. Robert stood quietly near the edge of the hall, hands clasped loosely in front of him, his expression steady. The last of the attendees filtered out behind us, their voices low, their faces thoughtful. I didn't speak first. He nodded once when I approached the barest tilt of his head. "You spoke well," he said softly. I gave a small smile. "Thank you." There was a pause, not uncomfortable. The kind of quiet that only two soldiers understand. He shifted his weight slightly, his hands still at his sides. I wanted to say something, he murmured. "About the past. About what you did. About what they did." His voice drifted rough at the edges. I waited. Finally, he met my eyes. "There are apologies," he said, "that don't need to be spoken. Some things. We just understand." I held his gaze, let the meaning settle between us. No embellishment, no ceremony. I nodded. "Just once. We do." He extended his hand, steady, deliberate. I took it. The handshake was firm, brief, but it carried weight. Not the weight of unfinished business, but the weight of mutual understanding. Of respect earned not through words, but through action. He didn't offer pity. He didn't ask for forgiveness on behalf of the family I was already leaving behind, and that somehow mattered more. When we let go, he gave a small breath of something that might have been relief. "I'm glad you showed up," he said quietly. I smiled again, small, genuine. "So am I." We didn't say goodbye. We didn't need to. I stepped out into the cool evening air, the city lights flickering beyond the glass. The air tasted clean, lighter. I didn't look back. Some endings don't need closure. Some reckonings don't need fanfare. And some victories, the ones that matter, are the ones you carry quietly, step by step, as you finally fully walk away. I live by the sea now. It's quiet here, quieter than any place I've ever known. The kind of quiet that doesn't press down on you but wraps around you like something old and patient. The mornings come slow, soft light spilling over the water, the salt air brushing against the windows. The nights hum with the sound of the tide, and nothing else. I don't wear the uniform anymore. The medals, the ribbons, they're packed away. Not hidden, not forgotten. Just put to rest. Symbols of a life that shaped me but no longer defines me. Most days I write. Not speeches, not reports, just words, fragments of thought, pieces of memory. I sit at a small wooden desk by the open window, the pages of my journal filling slowly with things I never said out loud. Some wounds I've stitched closed, some I let breathe. And for the first time in years, I'm not running. The Resilience Foundation has grown. Letters arrive weekly, stories of quiet battles, of quiet triumphs. People who thought they were alone, who found their way to us and realized they weren't invisible anymore. Sometimes I read their words and I see pieces of myself, the doubt, the grit, the ache of holding too much in for too long. I write them back when I can. And when I can't, I hope the silence between the letters says what words can't. I think sometimes about that night, about the wedding, the silence, the moment the room turned. I remember the applause, the stillness, the sharp fracture in my mother's eyes. But more than that, I remember the choice. I could have fought, I could have shouted, but I didn't. I chose to stand still, to let the truth speak louder than anything I could have said, to walk away without bitterness, without needing the last word. That's the thing no one teaches you when you grow up in a house where silence is currency. Sometimes the loudest act of defiance is refusing to carry their shame. I walk the shoreline most mornings, barefoot, unhurried. The gulls wheel overhead, the wind tangles my hair. The tide erases the footprints behind me. And that's enough. Sometimes the memories come back sharper than I expect, the weight of a body over my shoulders, the crack of distant gunfire, the sterile chill of hospital lights. And sometimes it's smaller things. The scrape of a chair on polished floors, the clink of a glass, the brittle sound of polite laughter. But none of it owns me now. I've learned that forgiveness isn't always something you give to others. Sometimes it's what you give yourself. The permission to begin again. To lay down the weight, to let go of the people who never knew how to carry you. The sea is endless here, the sky wide enough to hold everything I was and everything I'm still becoming. I dip the pen again, the words slow but steady across the page. And as I write, I remember the lesson that carried me through every fire, every betrayal, every silence too sharp to name. Honor isn't something anyone gives you. Honor is what you choose to keep even when no one is watching. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to ask you something. Where are you watching from tonight? Is it a quiet morning with sunlight spilling across your coffee, or a sleepless midnight where stories like this find you when the world has gone still? Let me know in the comments. We read every word with gratitude. And if this story touched something in you, consider subscribing. Not just for the stories, but to be part of something rare, a place that still believes in kindness, in healing, and in the power of second chances. Thank you for spending this time with me. Wherever you are, whatever you're carrying, I hope you hold this story close. And remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock. Sometimes it waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care. I'll see you in the next story.